Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Okay. Just go through the agenda and call off where we are. People can probably take it from there.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I feel like I have not done this maybe ever, so I should.
I'm sorry if I just volunteered you. For some reason, that you were in my head as having volunteered.
I think you tried to organize this so no good deed goes unpunished. But we can jump in and help you if you need.
Where's the bird that I'm hearing? Is that by Nora?
I think that's me. Yeah, I'm in the outdoor office. There was a hawk which David K got a picture of over here the other day.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, we could start. Well, we will start now, but I do want to pass the floor over to David for a moment of silence that we are going to commence this meeting with for the victims of the Atlanta shooting and the Boulder shooting. So
okay. Yeah, so we just wanted to have a moment of silence for those victims in Georgia and Colorado. And we want to name them if they've consented to be named in order to honor their lives and their backgrounds and who they were. So in Georgia, we have Delana Ashley Yon, Paul Andre Michaels, Xiaojie Tan, Dao Yo Fong, and 4 others whose family have asked to remain out of media. In Colorado, we have Denny Strong, Nevin Stanisic, Riki Olds, Trelana Bartkowiak, Eric Talley, Suzanne Fountain, Terry Leiker, Kevin Mahoney, Lynn Murray, and Jody Waters.
Thank you, David. I also want to point out that the majority of the victims of these shootings are women. And so as we take a moment of silence, I would ask that we all think about what the implications are of this, what our responsibilities are to fight this clear misogyny and address the violence against women, and particularly Asian women, Asian American women, that these attacks have ruptured to the surface. So I'm going to turn my camera off in more respect of this moment of silence, so feel free to do that as well.
And for those who would like to use this moment of silence and the horror of these events to take positive action, in just a few minutes, we'll be talking about our partners at Red Canary Song and what they have been advocating for and how we can join them.
Thank you. So the first item on our agenda is the political update. David, do you feel comfortable leading that like you usually do?
Presumably I'm the only one who took the notes, so sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have elections this year. As you know, we have several judicial candidates here. We recently finished an endorsement process for sorry, Rosa, someone brings up actually that we have scheduled at 6:40 for the judges to speak. So I don't want to talk out of turn. So why don't we do the judges first, and then let's do the political update.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I will introduce talking about judges. So we have two people here today who are judicial candidates. One, Rosemarie Montalbano, who is running for surrogate court, and one, Casilda Roper-Simpson, who's running for civil court. To refresh the memories of those who may not remember the difference of the different courts. Civil courts generally handle civil issues like suits, lawsuits, and disputes between people and organizations, generally with values $25,000 and under. They also do, civil court judges also do some criminal justice work, criminal judging work, and some family judging work. And I'm sure there are other departments that I'm missing, but that is, that's for civil court. Surrogate court judges are in charge, handle cases involving estates, especially estates of the deceased, and what should happen to them, how they should be divided, and how all of that should be put together. So with that background, Rosa, I'll let you introduce the candidates.
Okay, thank you so much for that, David. Judge Rosemarie Montalbano, would you like to speak first then?
Sure, great. Thank you. Thanks again for having me. I know in the past, a lot of people have said they, weren't interested in judicial races. So I'm so happy that people are now taking more interest in them. I am presently a Supreme Court judge. I am in the 7th year of being a judge. I've sat in the criminal courts, the civil court, and now in the Supreme Court, and all in Kings County. I have 30 years of legal experience. I'm born, raised, and I live in Bushwick, Brooklyn. I'm the child of immigrant parents. I always say my father came to this country, he was 31 years old. He never mastered the language. He just couldn't do it, He surrounded himself with people who spoke either Italian or Spanish, and he got by with broken English. But unfortunately, he was the victim of a lot of financial issues and a lot of things that he did not understand and let go. House went into foreclosure. And I, as a young adult, was forced to step up and to take charge of a situation because it was really out of control. And I learned through that process, and even through growing up, I don't know how many people are familiar with Bushwick. It was a struggling community. Many of the people that lived here, including my family, worked in factories. Some of that work could not be done in July and August. And I was the kid who went to Social Security with so they called it Social Security. It was unemployment. But to help them fill out the papers. And that's where it began. And then, I just continued doing that. People would bring their mail and I would read it. My parents owned a deli. We lived upstairs in a 4-room railroad apartment. And that deli was open 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. So any chance I got to go anywhere, even to unemployment, was a road trip for me. But it did open my eyes to a lot of issues that people were having, and helping them really made me feel good. We unfortunately were also a victim of predatory lenders. And that's a big deal that's happening now in Brooklyn. Deed theft is real. If the TPT program was put into effect by the Giuliani administration in the 90s. If that was in effect in the late 80s, when my house was in foreclosure, the house would have been gone, because there was a water bill, there was a tax bill. Those liens are now being sold. And I tell everyone that I meet and everyone that I know, if you have a water bill or a tax bill, take care of it. And I'm not saying, I don't mean take care of it, you have to pay it. You don't let that bill just sit around because you don't feel like paying it. You have something going on. But they will work out a payment plan with you. And you have to show up and you have to at least try to get that plan going. And it will save you your property. That having been said, a lot of people are just, putting it on the side and not doing it. And that's where the surrogate, I'd say that work, people need to have conversations with their family, with their friends, with their loved ones, and say like, what's going on with you and what are your plans? Because the surrogate court has to probate wills and handle estates where there's no will. And it's a 14-year term. It's a long time to have that much power. And to not be able to really, it's really hard to get a judge off for that. They have to really like blatantly break the law. So there are judges, and I don't have to tell you, who, will just sign things. I'm not, nor have I ever been a rubber stamp judge. The surrogate in Brooklyn is more important to me than Supreme Court, because there are 50 Supreme Court judges. There are only 2 surrogates. One handles the odd months, the other handles the even, depending on when your family member or loved one dies. That's who gets the case. There's a terrible backlog. Whoever goes in for 14 years has to have the experience to be able to go in on the first day and handle those cases. All my experience over the years has overlapped into issues. There are crimes going on there. You have to be able to recognize that. There are contracts. You have to be able to recognize that. There's the potential defect. You have to be willing to say, no, I'm not going to allow you to let your property go for half the value. And the surrogate has to sign off on those things. There are ways to avoid the surrogate court, and I hope that when I get elected, I have the opportunity to speak to people, because as judges, and I've discussed this with, Margarita Lopez is forced out because of retirement, but I've discussed with Harriet Thompson, the other surrogate, and we are allowed to go into communities and to discuss. We're not allowed to tell people or advise them on the law, but we are allowed to educate them on steps that they should be taking. And this really needs to happen. There's also the question of all the assignments that go along. There are guardianships for mentally and intellectually disabled children and adults. In addition, there are guardian ad litems appointed on almost every estate. There are thousands of appointments being given, and they shouldn't go to a select few. They should go to, we should have a list of people who qualify because of their experience, and that should rotate. It shouldn't be, 4 people get all the work in Brooklyn, because it really, at the end of the day, is millions of dollars sometimes. Some years, it's unbelievable what goes through that court. And the other thing is accountability. If you're a guardian and I'm signing off on a bill, you better show me a report where you went to see this person, or you made efforts in how to place them and where they're placing and what their needs are and what you're doing. Not, the same letter for every person and you just basically filling in the names. Historically, those courts have to be watched. I mean, if, anyone looks up the surrogate court, there have been a lot of issues, not only in Brooklyn, in the whole state. So again, this is why I say it's so important to elect someone who has the experience, who has the wherewithal to say, I'm not going to rubber stamp. I will be the gatekeeper. I will take that role on, and I will do it proudly and happily. I mean, I could keep going, but I don't know, if we want to do questions.
Sure. I think that's, yeah, let's pause and let's see if there are some questions. I think we have time for 1 or 2. Before we get questions, I just want to remind people that, judicial candidates are limited in what types of questions they're allowed to answer. So you can ask them questions about their experience, where they've worked, past decisions they've made. You can also ask them, how they would like to, run their office, how they would like to, you know, how they would like their work to go. But they obviously cannot comment on any potential cases or potential issues or how they would rule on legislation or things like that. Okay, so do we have questions?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Hi, Judge. It's nice to see
Hi.
you. Here's what I was wondering, based on what you were just describing, because I have a friend whose father passed away from COVID just a couple weeks ago without a will. And he was in a really tough spot because he lived with his dad and, the house has a mortgage on it and he, has nowhere to live. And like, there's all kinds of like complexities with the paperwork and the deed and the mortgage. Is there like anything that the surrogate judge could do to help like streamline, like, because he was just totally lost, was, has some stake in this property that could be worth something, but had no money to get started?
If it's in Brooklyn, it's worth more than something. And I know there's a mortgage on it, but that could be dealt with it also. There is, if you go onto the OCA website, there is a help center. There are volunteer lawyers, as well as some things he could try to do pro se. If he has the death certificate, he's going to have to file some paperwork and he has to get the ball rolling. I met a woman in Fort Greene Park this past weekend who told me her neighbor passed and without a will, and the family is going to walk away because they are overwhelmed and they can't afford a lawyer. There is no reason for that to happen. He has to get into, and I know everything right now with COVID is crazy, but there's a lot online. And if you go, I was on the Help Center website today, just because I want to be able to tell people, and there are resources there.
Basically, my question is like, is that a message that is something that I could say, like, you can do this, like you can navigate the system?
Absolutely. I don't know what other heirs, if his father had a spouse, if the house is in more than the father's name. These are all questions that I guess he's going to have to ask. If he has siblings, if there's no will and there's a spouse, the spouse takes, depending on how long they're married, like 50%, and then the children get the other 50%. But if there's no spouse and, really it depends on the lineage there, but he should absolutely start this.
It's just him. And it just makes me think that there's a lot of people who are in this position who are just like going to be stuck and don't know how to deal with it.
The court really will help him. And if he goes on, in addition to the help center, he could call the Bar Association because there are pro bono attorneys that are willing to help as well. I was just on a CLE yesterday or the day before, and a big firm, a big estate firm is doing pro bono work.
Okay.
And I mean, most people couldn't afford their services, even with, the fact that that firm with all that experience is doing pro bono work is unbelievable.
All right, cool. Well, thank
But
you.
he should definitely get that started.
Yeah, I told him that. All right.
The
good.
worst thing he could do is walk away. But he should start collecting all the paperwork he could find.
All right. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay, Sarah, is that your hand there?
So just since you had mentioned the surrogate court appointing guardians for adults with disabilities, my family and I had recently gone through this process for my younger cousin who, for those of you who don't know, has autism, which is called low functioning. So we went through my aunt mostly, but I'm set to be his guardian if something happens to him. So we went through the whole process, and it's a lot.
It is.
For sure. So I wanted to say thank you for looking out for the interests of people, young adults with disabilities, but also what resources are there for folks who are maybe not middle class, like my aunt, who could afford a lawyer to help make sure that her son's interests are looked out for.
Again, that's something that a parent can go to the court, even if they don't have family members, like you're willing to take on that responsibility. Some people have no one. And then it will be the surrogate's job to appoint a guardian. And that's why it's so important that the right people then get appointed. And, you know, the autism spectrum is very wide. And, you know, and I use this example of like what's going on with Britney Spears. That's a little different because that's a conservatorship, but she has the capacity to make a lot of money. There are people on the autistic spectrum that have the ability to make a lot of money because they're creating apps, websites, but they don't know how to manage it. They know how to do the job and focus, but they don't know how to manage the money. So again, it's very important that whoever is that guardian, that they be accountable, whether it's a family member or not. Just a side note for you, look into, you know, that your aunt, a special needs trust.
Oh, wait, in this case, we do have one.
Okay.
She had fortunately had the ability to do a lot of her homework throughout
Good.
my cousin's whole childhood. So, well, it was still hard on her to have this was not what she dreamed of for her
Of
son
course
as
not.
an adult. You know, we had all the documentation and paperwork in order, which still requires a time commitment that I worry a lot of other folks might not have.
It's true. And again, it's about, you know, like educating and telling people that the resources are there. It's reaching those people.
Yeah.
Some of them don't know.
It's
And
also
you know,
hard because New York City has a much longer wait list for adult services than other parts of the state. Just anecdotally, in case you guys did not know that.
mhm.
All right. I think we're going to draw to a close here. Before we do, I have what I hope, please, one quick question. This is just more on trying to help people, you know, get to know you and understand you better. So I wonder, could you list, have you been endorsed by anyone or any group that you're particularly proud of? Maybe name one or two. Also, you know, there are various judicial screening organizations in like the party, the Brooklyn, the city. I believe the LGBT Bar Association also has one. Are there any of those that you have or plan to submit to? And if you have submitted to them, what did they find?
So I have been found qualified by the county Democratic Screening Committee. When I ran for civil court, I also was qualified by the New York City Bar and Legal. They don't screen until after you're on the ballot. So I intend to present to Legal again and to the New York City Bar Association. And I was found qualified by them for civil court 7 years ago. I am received the endorsement of IND, Independent Neighborhood Democrats, CBID, Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats. I have a lot that I'm proud of. My Assemblywoman Maritza Davila, Senator Julia Salazar, district leaders, Sammy Olivares, Christina, I don't want to mess up her name, but yes, Emile Bazile. I also have David Schwartz, Shaquana Boykin, Walter Mosley. I also am endorsed by all of the court unions, the lower court officers, the Supreme Court, the clerks. I received an endorsement yesterday from a group, Haitian Powerhouse. I don't have them in front of me, but wait, I do have. Jim Owls.
And Jim Owls.
Jim Owls was my first. La Nueva Esperanza, which is a nonprofit program that I've been volunteering, mentoring young girls, and they feed and counsel HIV families and individuals. They have a nutrition program as well as deliver meals. That's all I could think of right now. And I'm talking to a lot of people.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you for having me. I would love to stay on, but like I said, I'm actually off to present at Lambda now. But thank you all. Have a great night.
Rosa, you're muted.
Thank you. Great. So our next guest speaker is Judge Casilda Roper-Simpson. Hi, Judge. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take the floor.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. My name is Casilda Roper-Simpson, and I want to answer the last question that was asked for of Judge Montalbano first. I did not appear in front of any judicial committee. I chose not to. And it's a question that I've actually been asked in most of my interviews lately over the process. And I'm sure some of you have read that there's been some issues with the committee in terms of some bias that they may have. I am not an establishment candidate. I'm a grassroots individual. I'm running this race from a grassroots perspective. I have always been an attorney for the people, and I expect to be a judge for the people. I will not be an establishment judge. And in terms of endorsements, I'm still speaking to my campaign, and my team is still speaking to the various people. A lot of district leaders that I've spoken with, or myself personally, and that I've called, have all waited to see whether or not I make the ballot. And that today was the last day. It was a lot of work. In addition, but I have been recently endorsed by Haitian Powerhouse, which was really a humbling endorsement for me. I actually was one of the first attorneys that represented Mr. Abner Louima in 1997 for the worst police brutality case in the history of New York City. And when no one was interested in the case, when he was handcuffed and accused of hitting the police officer, myself and two other individuals at the time of the attorneys took that case on. And then when the charge was dropped, then folks started coming to us taking that case. So I wanted to address that first and foremost. In terms of my education, my family and I came to this country from Panama. I was born in Panama. I came to this country when I was 5. And in being raised here and being educated in this country, I received a rich education. English is my second language. And when I was bussed out, I was a product of busing in the 70s, if anyone's familiar with that. So I was bussed out of my community because they wanted to integrate. And after leaving where I lived in Crown Heights, I grew up in Crown Heights, and I was bussed out to Dyker Heights. When I went to class there, they said that I could not read. My comprehension was poor. And I was reading at that time, 2nd, 3rd grade reading level when I was in 6th grade. I was, to say the least, extremely embarrassed. They took me out of my classroom and put me in a room by myself. So because of that, I decided that I needed to do more. So I went to the library on Schenectady and Eastern Parkway, where I live, not too far from my home. I walked there every day, and I read and read and read, and I made sure that I did all that I could to make sure I did better in English. And hence here I am today. I still speak Spanish, but it's not the best. So my Spanish suffered, but my English is pretty decent. I wanted to be an attorney, and I wasn't quite sure how to take that step. I was always had my reservations because of my struggle with English. I always thought that it would be my handicap. When I was in middle school, I discovered the law. We call it junior high school then. They call it middle school now. And I wasn't doing so well in social studies, and my teacher called my mom and said I wasn't doing so great, and my mother was not happy. And coming over from another country, there's only 3 things we heard in my house: education, education, education. My mother put me in my room with that social studies book, and I think I knew everything back and forth. And when I came out, I learned the Constitution, we the people. I learned the Constitution, and that's what I knew I wanted to do. And because I just wasn't still sure that I could do this, I graduated from high school, and I was a legal secretary. I went to New York City Community College, downtown Brooklyn, and I could type like the devil, and I did shorthand. And I worked as a legal secretary, and I worked in some of the biggest law firms in the city. I worked at the Chrysler Building. I worked at really big law firms. And I learned medical malpractice. I learned all the basic, how to do summons and complaint. And then I started interacting with attorneys and realizing I could do this. I then went to Brewer College, and I worked full-time and went to school full-time. So I was carrying a heavy load, but I knew I could do it. And I went to, and I did political science. After graduating with my political science degree, I then became a paralegal in the Kings County District Attorney's Office. I work under Liz Holzman and Mr. Hines. And after being there, I realized I could do this. I applied for Brooklyn Law School, and I got into Brooklyn Law School. And you would think that I would deter, because at that point I had 2 children. I had a 4-year-old daughter and a 9-month-old baby. But I wasn't. I was determined that I wanted to be an attorney, and I did. I went to law school, and with my village, my mom and my sisters and my friends and my husband, I graduated from law school. My dad, unfortunately, wasn't there to see me graduate, because because the neighborhood we lived in, we experienced healthcare racism. And as a result of that, my father died at an early age of 51. And we just did not have the proper healthcare where we lived in our area in Crown Heights at the time. And I realized I wanted to be a social worker when I took the LSAT, the SAT, and I wrote that. And I realized I could do social work and law for social justice. And presently today, I'm an administrative law judge. And I've been an administrative law judge for 3 years. And I do social service cases. And I do public assistance, I do food stamps, and Medicaid cases. And when I have Medicaid cases and see that the spend down, some of you know what spend downs, you have to be able to pay X amount in order to qualify for Medicaid. And sometimes some of the folks that come in front of me and appear in front of me, they only get Social Security. The max is maybe $1,800 for the majority of people that appear in front of me. A spend down sometimes is $16. So then the question is, well, how do they afford this? So there's a lot of issues that the community experiences, and you need an attorney that can understand and see that. And over the years, I prepared myself professionally and personally for this position that I'm running for. As was noted by David, criminal court, a civil court judge has to go to criminal court, family court, and civil court. I have been a criminal defense attorney since 1996. I've been on the 18B panel, and on that panel, you're required to have done trials, and I have been to be certified every 3 years on that panel. I may not have been in front of the Judicial Committee, and they may not have qualified me because I chose not to. But every 3 years, I'm required to submit documentations from judges that I appear in front of, and my adversaries. And I have also practiced family law. I was a managing attorney for a foster care agency on Fulton Street in Brooklyn. And I managed attorneys and trained them how to do neglect cases, abuse cases. I've done civil rights cases. I told you, I shared with you the Abner Lima case. And subsequent to that, I've done police brutality cases. 19 years ago, I represented pro bono, a gentleman who was accused of a murder, a homicide case. And I did his appeal. The last administration released him on a clemency because they found that he was innocent. And he recently reached out to me as he was driving from the airplane that dropped him off in Miami to thank me. I've done a tremendous amount of pro bono work. When my parents came, when we came to this country, understanding that my mother only had a 9th grade education and my father was a sky cap, all they asked of us was to give back to the community. And that's all I ever do. I am a mentor for Brooklyn United for 3 young ladies. I am an adjunct professor. I've been teaching for 13 years at Malloy College. I teach criminal justice, paralegal. My students reach out to me to mentor them. And just 2 nights ago, one called me for some advice and some guidance. I have been an attorney for the people, and I will be a judge for the people. My diverse and in terms of my profession allows me to understand as a litigator, the attorneys that will be coming in front of me. Presently, the folks that I serve are pro se. Not everyone gets to come to court with an attorney. Not everyone can afford an attorney. So it requires me to be able to be very simplistic and make sure that they understand what's going on in the courtroom. And as Judge Montalbano explained, that there are individuals who are high-powered attorneys that have pro bono. I keep a list that I explain to the pro se individuals who don't go to page 5 of the notices that they serve that says you can get a legal aid attorney. And I direct them to that page. We're doing remote. I do 3 days of hearings presently and 2 days of writing decisions. I do 15 to 18 hearings a day. And we were deemed essential workers. So I'm prepared for this seat. I'm very qualified. And keeping in mind that I am not an establishment candidate. I am a grassroots. I'm hitting the ground running, and I'm asking for the support of yourselves and asking that you share with your community and ask that you look at my website and know that I am committed.
Thank you very much, Judge Roper-Simpson. Does anyone have any questions for the candidate? I'm going to share your website actually to the chat for everyone's reference. Oh, Sarah, thank you for raising your hand.
Thanks. So, not to be the person who's always asking judges questions, but I work in healthcare, and a lot of my role has led me to believe that a public option for healthcare would be best. Particularly when I learned about patients who have faced the Medicaid spend down. Would you mind talking a bit more about your experience with, in your case, the public who has faced this?
The public who's what, I'm sorry?
About the Medicaid spend downs that you've faced and presided over as a judge.
Well, what happens with I've actually, my resume, I've actually also worked in healthcare. I worked for HHC as an associate director, and I was, my job there was to streamline the process for when patients came in to see the doctors. And I am certified as a silver in lean in terms of training in healthcare. And in terms of the spend down, what happens with Medicaid is when the individuals, they have to be able to pay out of pocket first, and not necessarily cash, but be able to pay, whether it's their medication, X-ray, a variety of things, and they have to pay for that. So if it's $500, it can come in various type of ways to show that you spend down, and then the Medicaid will kick in. And it's a problem for a lot of the individuals that have appeared in front and have appeared and they say, well, how can I do that if, you know, I'm only making $1,600 and then it's suggested to them to look at those various ways to show it. And it's for a year. It's for that year period, that period of a year. So it's an issue within certain communities, most definitely.
Thank you very much for that question, Sarah, and thank you for your answer, Judge. Do we have any more? We have time for maybe one more question if anyone has. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like to hear our member updates. We'll be talking about our political updates and our advocacy updates next. And then we have a panel of 3 guest speakers to speak about the city's response to emergency housing needs.
I thank you for having me again. And I'll stay in the meeting. I do have another meeting to get to, but I do want to stay for a little bit. I thank you again, all, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to give a very quick advocacy update before I give the floor to David, who will give a political update, we have a lot more things going on that front. For advocacy, I think it's pretty much, I just want to make this short because we do have to consider time, but our issues, for anyone who's new to this group, our issues that we really try to focus on consistently have been the New York Health Act and Invest in Our New York, which is a slate of legislative bills for tax reform to tax the wealthy. So if you are interested in really getting active on that front, please reach out and join our advocacy committee or join our Slack. We do have a Slack channel where we're very active and we share a lot of information and encourage each other and help keep each other accountable. Secondly, as we mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, when we had a moment of silence for the victims of the Atlanta and Boulder shootings, we do have an immediate call to action to amplify from Red Canary Song. If you're not familiar with this organization, definitely, oh, I did not share that to everyone. Sorry. Definitely encourage you to get familiar with Red Canary Song. Thank you, David. An organization of Asian diaspora massage parlor workers is asking that we ask our city council reps to oppose an NYPD Asian hate crime task force, as they feel that funneling more money to the NYPD will not ultimately make Asian diaspora residents of New York City safer. So to be very clear, there's a city council rep, I'm sorry that her name escapes me, who is Margaret Chin, who is putting forth this legislation for an NYPD Asian hate crime task force, and Red Canary Song, which is a group comprised of migrant and massage parlor workers that organized in reaction to, sorry, I won't give you the full background, but as our organization is supportive of Red Canary Song's work, so we ask that you also oppose this particular city council bill, and that we do not have further NYPD funding, ostensibly for language justice issues. Anyway, if you read the full post, if you read Red Canary Song's position, you'll get more contextual info on that. But that is an immediate need and an urgent need. I believe the past day has been focused on that. So if you can send an email tonight, that would be great. But please also get in touch with us if you want to do any kind of work with us for advocacy and solidarity with the AAPI community, because May is
so my thing is stuck.
American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And so we are keeping our ears open for further actions. based in New York City. So thank you. Marion, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. I don't know exactly how the legislation is being phrased at City Council. And I can say that actually the Asian Crime Task Force has been the demand of the community at large. I think the issue is what exactly does that crime task force do? Because many crimes, many incidents that are reported are not considered hate crimes or of a suspect character. So as Tammy Duckworth would say, you know, the incidents are reported and then, you know, you recategorize it in such a way that you're not able to see the nature of what is actually going on in terms of Asian hate, anti-Asian hate, and anti-Asian violence. So I am for defunding the police, and I think that there needs to be some kind of administrative structure to properly investigate and properly classify incident reporting. Now, I haven't seen what Margaret is putting out today and tomorrow, but I think to completely oppose and some kind of administrative structure and other kinds of help to look at the incidents would be giving up on our community, because that's what Tammy Duckworth and others are calling the Justice Department to do, is like the reporting or the investigation of it just has not been adequate. And in fact, sometimes is reclassified or misclassified in a sense that you don't really know what's going on, especially with people who are vulnerable, who have language issues, who are inadequately able to represent themselves. So I would urge everyone to take a look at exactly what the legislation is. And now Red Canary Song has a good approach, but I think that let's not just jump into it that simplistically, because we've been fighting for a long time for channels to be able to investigate, which were not afforded to us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marion. And you really do raise a good point, which is that we need the good data, right? And we need that administrative element to capture good data. And this raises in my mind a parallel to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis, which is the fact that we don't know how many Indigenous women are actually kidnapped or trafficked because we don't capture that data well. So I really do appreciate you interjecting and giving your opinion on that. And I welcome anyone in this group to really engage with us, especially on the advocacy level, because this is really the task ahead of us, right? And this is really our responsibility, is to decipher what is the legislation being put forward and what are the different community asks and what are the different community needs. Well, anyway, thank you, Marion, and we'll move on to the political update from David. And after a political update, we'll move on to our housing panel. And I just want to say hi to Elena, who's one of our featured speakers for that panel.
Okay.
Hi,
Elena, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, thank you. Just wanted to acknowledge.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
All right. So I'm going to start with something that's huge, but I'm only going to talk a little bit about it, which is the 2021 elections. You are probably already aware that there will be a lot of seats up for grab starting on the primary this June 24th. And for some races, there will even be competitive ones in the general election in November. But I'm not going to talk too much about them, just as to say, you know, where we are in the process. Today was the deadline for submitting a petition to get on the ballot. So it's the last day that any campaign had to get petitions on the ballot. So hopefully all the candidates that you like and support are managed to do so. There was also a major fundraising deadline recently. March 15th was one of the major fundraising deadlines. And in some ways, it's, for many campaigns, it's going to be a make or break one. New York City offers matching funds for campaigns that can get enough donations from inside their district. And if that happens, then most of their donations are matched 8-to-1, which provides a huge influx of funding to help them get through it. And for most campaigns, if they don't get it by this March 15th filing, they probably will not have the resources to effectively compete. So they submitted on March 15th, and by April 15th, basically, we will know. Some campaigns obviously have already received matching funds. Some are still hoping to get them, and we'll know that by April 15th. This includes even up to mayoral candidates too. Like right now, the only 3 mayoral candidates who have matching funds are Eric Adams, Maya Wiley, and Scott Stringer. But a bunch of candidates have said that they believe they have submitted enough matching funds to receive it this April, including Yang, Morales, Garcia, and Donovan. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. But as this all goes down to city council races too. Yeah, so it's 2.5 months away. Early voting starts on June 12th. On a not personal, it's not the right word, on a note related to us, you may have seen that Boris Noble, who we as an organization endorsed in the 48th City Council District, he dropped out of the race yesterday due to developing long-haul coronavirus. So we, of course, feel for him and his family. I've talked to him personally about this, and he's described just how debilitating it can be. And he's really upset he had to make this call. In terms of us as an organization, our endorsement committee is going to meet to discuss if we want to do any updates to our endorsements in the light of that race, in light of this information, because this would now actually put us at 0 endorsed candidates for this cycle. All right, moving on. If you checked our Facebook group, you will see that the Brooklyn Young Democrats have sort of upped their feud with party boss Rodney Spichot. The ante has been upped. The Brooklyn Young Democrats is the official youth arm of the Brooklyn Democratic Party, but it's chartered by the New York State Young Democrats. Every 2 years, they have to renew their charter. But to renew the charter, it requires a letter of support from the party boss. And so Brooklyn Young Democrats, as I said, they've been clashing with county Democrats and the party boss on some issues such as candidates they endorsed or party reform, or the latest issue was the Brooklyn Young Democrats voted to censure Andrew Cuomo, while the party boss compared Andrew Cuomo to the Central Park Five. So likely due to these reasons, Brooklyn Young Democrats asked for a letter of recommendation. They were asked to provide a lot of information to the county, like a list of executive board members, their full membership with contact information, their bylaws, their endorsements, etc. They believe they made a good faith effort to provide what the party wanted and schedule several meetings with them. They did decline to give contact information for their members. Basically this boiled down to Rodney Spichot sent a letter to them saying that she actually wanted to decertify them as the official youth arm. So this is sort of an unprecedented situation because in the history of the New York State Young Democrats, it's never been the case that an organization has wanted to continue being the official arm but not had support of the party boss. So we will see how this goes. What else is going on? Representative Tom Reed, he's a New York congressman who represents the state's southern tier regions to Western New York. Basically, I guess reverse that sort of from Erie to Ithaca. It's very mostly rural, or very rural, not mostly rural region. He was accused of sexual harassment by a lobbyist, and in response, he announced he will not be running for re-election in 2022. Now, this, of course, has implications for our own governor, who is embroiled in scandals of his own. Last month we were only talking about the nursing home scandal. In just a month, 7 women have come forward with claims of sexual assault, harassment, or other inappropriate behaviors. Attorney General Letitia James has started an investigation of both those issues and the nursing home issues with an independent prosecutor. The New York State Assembly has similarly begun an investigation into the governor. And he just has not been getting a lot of good news, from a cover-up of structural problems on the Mario Cuomo Bridge to yesterday. It was revealed that top health officials in New York State were told to prioritize coronavirus testing for Cuomo's relatives and close associates. And this is just along with not necessarily illegal or even unethical, but an exposure of sort of a culture of, keeping certain friends on the inside and bullying those on the outside that's been happening in the Cuomo administration. In good news, it looks like New York State will have legalized marijuana relatively soon. There is an agreement among legislative chambers and Cuomo, or a bill that everyone would be content to pass. This law will have some social justice provisions that provide aid and preference to those people and communities who've been negatively impacted by marijuana prosecution. And honestly, it has traditionally been Cuomo who has not wanted those provisions in the bill. Is the reason why we have not had medical marijuana. So his crises seem to have helped, at least in this situation. And that is my political update. If anyone has any quick questions on those or anything else big that they thought I missed, they're welcome to chime in now for about 5 minutes. Okay, seeing no one with that, Rosa, why don't you move us along?
Okay, thank you, Dave.